I was 9 years old when my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, or so I thought. The sun was streaming through my bedroom window, casting familiar shadows across my collection of stuffed animals lined up on the shelf. I was getting ready for school, carefully braiding my hair the way my father had taught me, when I heard raised voices coming from the living room. My mother's voice was different that day. Not the usual frustrated tone I'd grown accustomed to during her arguments with my father, but something harder, more resolved. There was a finality to it that made my stomach twist with an unnamed fear. Within hours, everything I knew vanished. My mother moved through our apartment like a woman possessed, throwing my clothes into garbage bags with trembling hands. She wouldn't answer my questions, wouldn't look me in the eye. Tears streamed down her face, but her jaw was set with determination I'd never seen before. "We're leaving," was all she said. "We're going somewhere new." "But what about Dad?" I remember screaming, my voice breaking with panic. "We can't leave without Dad." She didn't answer. She just kept packing. By that evening, we were on a bus heading to another city, watching everything I'd ever known disappear through the rear window. My father wasn't there to say goodbye. He hadn't even called. In my 9-year-old mind, this could only mean one thing. My mother had stolen me away from him. Chapter 2. The Enemy in My New Home. The man my mother brought us to lived in a modest apartment in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Everything about him felt wrong to me. His smile, his kindness, the way he tried to make conversation, all of it seemed like an elaborate disguise, hiding the monster who had destroyed my family. I decided, with all the fierce conviction a 9-year-old could muster, that he was the enemy. This stranger had somehow bewitched my mother, turned her against my father, and torn our family apart. And my mother, my own mother, had betrayed us all. In my mind, she became Judas, the ultimate traitor, and I made it my mission to make both of them pay for what they'd done. My behavior became unbearable. I refused to call him by name, wouldn't eat the meals he prepared, and spent hours locked in my room, sobbing for my father. Every kindness he extended was met with hostility. Every attempt my mother made to explain was drowned out by my screams. "I hate you!" I would shriek at her, my face red and streaked with tears. "You stole me from Dad! You're a liar and a traitor!" The hysteria became constant. I was drowning in my own anger and grief, lashing out at everyone around me. At school, I was sullen and withdrawn. At home, I was a tornado of rage. My mother would find me late at night, curled up on my bed, clutching an old photograph of my father and crying until I made myself sick. The man she'd brought us to, my stepfather, though I refused to acknowledge him as such, bore the brunt of my hatred with remarkable patience. He never raised his voice, never retaliated when I screamed that I wished he would disappear, never complained when I destroyed the gifts he tried to give me. This only made me angrier. Why wouldn't he fight back? Why wouldn't he prove that he was the villain I needed him to be? Chapter 3. Years of Poison. This went on for years. 3 long years of making everyone around me miserable, of poisoning the atmosphere in our home with my bitterness and resentment. I became an expert in cruelty, finding new ways to hurt the 2 people who were trying their hardest to build a life for us. I would accidentally break things that belonged to my stepfather. I would tell my mother I hated her at every opportunity. I refused to participate in family activities, sulking in corners during holidays, making sure everyone knew how much I disapproved of our new life. All I wanted was to go back. Back to my father, back to our old apartment, back to the way things used to be. In my mind, I'd constructed an elaborate fantasy of my old life, one where my father was perfect, where our family had been happy, where my mother had ruined everything by leaving. The pull toward my father was magnetic, all-consuming. I would lie awake at night, plotting ways to contact him, to run away and find him, to expose my mother's lies, and return to where I belonged. Chapter 4. The Truth Unveiled. Then, one evening when I was 12, everything changed again. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table. My stepfather had taken a walk, giving us space. There was something different in her eyes that night, a weariness, but also a kind of strength. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by years of my abuse and the secrets she'd been carrying. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you why we really left." I crossed my arms defensively, prepared for another round of excuses, more justifications for her betrayal. But as she started speaking, really speaking, I felt my armor begin to crack. "Your father." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your father wasn't the man you remember. Or maybe he was, to you. Children often see their parents differently. But to me, to our marriage, he was someone else entirely." She told me about the first time she caught him cheating. I had been 3 years old, too young to remember. She'd found text messages on his phone, confronted him with shaking hands and a breaking heart. He'd cried, begged for forgiveness, sworn it would never happen again. And because she loved him so much it hurt, she forgave him. But it did happen again, and again, and again. My mother described a pattern that began shortly after my birth and continued for 6 years. Different women, different excuses, but always the same cycle. Discovery, tears, promises, forgiveness, repeat. She stayed because she loved him, yes, but also because of me. She didn't want to take me away from my father. She couldn't afford to leave. He controlled all the money, made all the decisions. She felt trapped, caught between her love for him, her love for me, and her own diminishing sense of self-worth. "At first, it was every few months," she said, staring at her hands. "Then it became more frequent. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It was like he knew I wouldn't leave, so why bother pretending?" Her voice broke as she described the worst day. A young woman, no more than 25, had shown up at our apartment door. I had been at school. The woman was pregnant, visibly so, and she'd come with a demand. "She told me I needed to let him go," my mother said, tears now flowing freely. "She said the baby was his, that he loved her, that I was standing in the way of their happiness. She stood in our doorway, one hand on her belly, and told me to release my husband so he could start his real family. That was the breaking point. Not the first affair, not the second, not even the 20th. But that moment standing in the doorway of the home she'd tried so hard to keep together, facing a pregnant woman who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle. That's when something inside my mother finally snapped. "I didn't plan any of it," she continued. "I didn't know where we were going. I just knew we had to leave. That man, your stepfather, I barely knew him. He was someone I'd met briefly, weeks earlier. When I called him, desperate, with nowhere to go, he said yes without hesitation. He took us in. He asked for nothing, and I couldn't stay with your father another day, not after that." Chapter 5. Denial and Desperation. I didn't believe her. I couldn't. To believe her would mean accepting that my father, my hero, the man I'd been mourning for 3 years, was capable of such cruelty. It would mean acknowledging that I'd been wrong, that I'd spent years punishing the wrong people, that my mother had been the victim all along. "You're lying," I told her, my voice cold. "You're making this up to make yourself feel better about what you did." The pain in her eyes should have stopped me, but I was too far gone in my denial. I stood up from the table and walked away, leaving her sitting there, tears streaming down her face. But her words had planted a seed of doubt. Over the following weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Small memories began surfacing, fragments I'd dismissed or forgotten. My father coming home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't my mother's. Hushed phone conversations that would end abruptly when I entered the room. My mother's red, swollen eyes on mornings when she thought I wasn't looking. I needed to know the truth. Not her truth, the real truth. So I did what any stubborn 12-year-old would do. I decided to find my father myself. Chapter 6. The Search. It took me months of secret planning. I used the school computer lab to search social media sites, typing in his name over and over, scrolling through profiles that might be him. I asked old classmates if they remembered my address from before we moved, hoping to piece together information about where he might be. Finally, I found him. A Facebook profile with his picture, his name, his life laid out in photographs and updates for the world to see. And there, in his photos, was everything my mother had said and more. A new family. A wife who wasn't my mother. Children who weren't me, including a little girl about 6 years old. The same age I would have been when we left. The timeline made horrible, perfect sense. My hands shook as I scrolled through the photos. Beach vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, all the moments I'd imagined having with him were there, just with different people in them. He looked happy. They all looked happy. I sent him a message. My fingers trembled so badly I had to retype it 3 times. Dad, it's me. We need to talk. Chapter 7. The meeting that changed everything, he responded within a day, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop downtown. I lied to my mother, told her I was going to a friend's house, and took 2 buses to get there. When I walked in, I saw him sitting in a corner booth. He looked the same but different, older maybe. Or perhaps I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. He stood up when he saw me, and for a moment I thought he might hug me. Instead, he just gestured to the seat across from him. "You've grown," he said, as if commenting on the weather. I didn't waste time with small talk. I pulled out a piece of paper where I'd written down everything my mother had told me. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Did you cheat on Mom? Is that why we left?" I expected denials, excuses, anger. I expected him to tell me it was all lies, that my mother had poisoned my mind against him. I was prepared for a fight. What I wasn't prepared for was the truth. He sighed, took a sip of his coffee, and nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "Your mother told you the truth. I made a lot of mistakes. I wasn't a good husband." The coffee shop seemed to tilt around me. This was supposed to be the moment where he explained everything away, where he became my hero again. But instead, he just sat there, admitting it all with the casual tone of someone discussing a minor inconvenience. "But why?" I managed to ask, my voice breaking. He shrugged. "I don't know. I was young. I wasn't ready for the responsibility. Your mother deserved better." "Then why didn't you fight for us? Why didn't you come find us?" Another shrug. By the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late, and honestly, I had already moved on. I met someone else, started over. It seemed easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. As if I hadn't spent 3 years crying myself to sleep, hating my mother, destroying any chance of happiness in our new home. All because I'd been waiting for him to come rescue me. "Do you even miss me?" I whispered. He looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Of course I do. But life moves on. You understand, right? You're practically a teenager now. You get it." But I didn't get it. I didn't understand how a father could just walk away, start over, replace his daughter like she was an old piece of furniture he'd tired of. I left that coffee shop in a daze. The bus ride home was a blur of tears and shattered illusions. Chapter 8. The Long Road to Forgiveness. When I got home, My mother was waiting at the kitchen table. She knew immediately that something had happened. Maybe it was the look on my face, or maybe she'd always known this day would come. "You found him," she said. Not a question, a statement. I collapsed into her arms and sobbed. Years of misdirected anger, guilt, and grief poured out of me. I apologized over and over, begging for forgiveness for every cruel word, every hateful glance, every moment of pain I'd caused her. "I'm so sorry," I choked out between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I've been so horrible to you." She held me tight, rocking me like she used to when I was small. "I forgive you," she whispered. "I've always forgiven you. You were just a child trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. But forgiving myself was another matter entirely. That's been the hardest part." Chapter 9. Living with the wait years have passed since that day. I'm grown now, with a life of my own. I have a wonderful husband who knows this whole story and loves me despite my past mistakes. We have 2 beautiful, wild boys who fill our home with laughter and chaos. By any measure, I should be happy. And I am, mostly. But late at night, when the house is quiet and my family is asleep, I still think about those years. I still see my mother's face, etched with pain, as I screamed that I hated her. I still hear my own voice, cruel and cutting, telling my stepfather I wished he'd never existed. My stepfather, who I now call Dad without hesitation, never held those years against me. He and my mother are still together, still strong, still the foundation of our extended family. He walks my sons to the park, teaches them to ride bikes, shows them patience and kindness. He's everything a grandfather should be. And yet, I can't shake the guilt. I robbed him of 3 years of peace. I robbed my mother of any chance at happiness during that time. And for what? For a fantasy? For a father who couldn't be bothered to fight for me? I've tried therapy. I've talked it through with my mother countless times, always ending with her reassuring me that I was just a child, that I couldn't have known better. But deep down, I wonder if that's true. Couldn't I have been kinder? Shouldn't I have seen their love, their sacrifice, their patience? Epilogue. The lesson I'm still learning: my sons are young, still 6 and 4. Sometimes I watch them play and think about what might happen if their world were suddenly turned upside down. Would they react the way I did? Would they lash out, assign blame, refuse to see the truth? I hope I'm building a different foundation for them, one where they know they're loved, where honesty is valued over fantasy, where they understand that people are complex and situations are rarely black and white. But more than anything, I hope I'm teaching them what my mother taught me through her endurance and forgiveness, that love sometimes means absorbing pain that isn't yours to bear, that patience can outlast cruelty, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. I see my father occasionally now. Awkward coffee meetings once or twice a year. He's still with his family, still living the life he chose. We make small talk, avoid difficult subjects, and part ways with promises to meet again soon, promises we both know we might not keep. But the real father in my life, the one who showed up when he didn't have to, who stayed when any reasonable person would have left, who loved a child who treated him like an enemy, sits at my dinner table every Sunday. My boys climb all over him, and he laughs with pure joy. My mother watches from the kitchen, and I see in her eyes the peace she's finally found. And me? I'm still learning to forgive myself. Maybe I always will be. But every day, I try to be better, to show my family the love and respect I failed to show years ago, to break the cycle of hurt and anger that could so easily continue. That 9-year-old girl who thought she knew everything was wrong about almost everything that mattered. But she's still part of me, and her mistakes are still mine to carry. I just hope that by living honestly now, by loving fiercely now, I can somehow balance the scales of all that pain I caused. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can teach us, if we let them. And that, perhaps, is the only redemption I'll ever find.